Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and a video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm pleased to have a conversation with Mary Inman. Mary, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Fritz, for having me.
Allow me to briefly introduce you to our audience. And the main theme of today is the whistleblower, because you are partner at Partners, and you've been doing this for over 30 years. And not only as a business, it's also what you do in your spare time supporting whistleblowers. So it's like that's what it is for you. And if I'm correct in my homework, you're based out of San Francisco, California. Am I
That's
correct? Well,
correct.
again, welcome.
Thank you.
As we're going to talk about whistleblowers throughout this episode, what's the definition? What is it? What qualifies somebody as a whistleblower?
Great question. So, to be a whistleblower, you need to be speaking up about something that is illegal, unethical. It has to be a serious measure. You're speaking up against some sort of wrongdoing. And that is the legal definition. I think we have a cultural definition
Yeah.
that's a little bit different and broader, but the legal definition, which in most countries affords you the protection against retaliation, you need to be speaking up about a policy violation, a legal violation, something serious enough that will often, unfortunately, and we can get into this more, prompt the person that you're reporting against often to retaliate against you. I often say that despite the progress that we've made in the world, we still reside in a medieval mindset when it comes to whistleblowers, that we revert to a defensive crouch where we try to shoot the messenger to divert attention from the message instead of looking at it as a
Yeah.
growth
Yeah.
opportunity and actually looking at them as canaries in the coal mine who are actually among your most loyal employees who are willing to, stick their hand up and say, wait, I think we're off course here.
Yeah.
And I want us to correct, because the easiest thing to do is just keep your head down and say nothing, right? So why is it that we have this instinct to sort of shoot the messenger, retaliate against people who are honestly just trying to help?
Oh, there's so many segues into this small introduction. I don't know where to start with my follow-up questions. But one of the first things which come to mind, and we're really diving into the deep end, and then we'll get out of bed. But um, does it maybe have to do with the fact that we call these individuals whistleblowers, that it has a negative connotation by default? So if we change the way we call these people, maybe the connotation could be more positive of what they contribute to society.
I think that's certainly part of it, right? What if we had come to know about them or think about them as risk management tools,
Yeah.
right? That they're just a risk advisor. That's a very different um, formulation for
Yeah.
who they are, but it comes with the baggage that you've
Yeah.
said. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter the country, and I know this podcast is listened to in countries around the globe. You're a dauber, you're a grasser, you're a snitch. There's so many
Yeah.
different words in different cultures for this idea of, don't speak out against the group.
Yeah.
So it's very hardwired, and I agree with you. I think the moniker whistleblower comes loaded with a lot of baggage.
Okay, so but what you're basically saying, the fact that there are all these terms, doesn't matter how you call it, there's always going to be that negative connotation because of what people do.
I think it's, I think there, it, I think we're trying to resuscitate the
Yeah,
term
yeah,
and give it a new gloss. And I think people are starting to see, particularly as other checks against corruption fall to the wayside or breaking down. I think I often refer to whistleblowers as the fifth estate,
yeah,
right? That when government hasn't worked, it's often the whistleblower who just brings that voice, that cultural voice that rises it, makes an issue come to a level where it resonates with all of us. So I don't think it's always a negative
yeah.
connotation, but I think it comes loaded with the baggage that we have as from very, very early age as children, that don't tell tales, be loyal.
Yeah.
I think so. We're trying to resuscitate it and sort of debunk the myths that come along with it and maybe reclaim the word is, I think, a better way to think about it.
Okay, I'll come back to that a little bit later because I first want to ask you. You started your legal career 30 years representing whistleblowers. Can you look back and take us back to okay, how did this all start? Was it by coincidence that you actively seek this position?
It was serendipitous,
Yeah,
like many great things in people's
yeah,
careers. I went to law school with a very idealistic notion that I wanted to change the world, that lawyers, to quote Hamilton, the musical, were in the room where it happened. But I had an amorphous notion. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to use that legal degree. So I was very lucky that after I had done apprenticeships, I'd done two clerkships with a couple of federal judges. I'd gone to a commercial civil defense firm to pay off loans, get some training. I'd been there for under a year. And a colleague of mine who knew that I wasn't long for the traditional defense world said, um, this headhunter says there's a job at a firm that's opening a San Francisco office and they specialize in whistleblowing. Are you interested? And at that point in time, this was 1997, whistleblowing laws are not what they were today. It was very, even in the United States, it was pretty narrow. We had a couple of statutes, but it has been such an enormous growth industry. And maybe we can talk about this in a minute, but the area I practice in is not employment law where you protect whistleblowers from retaliation. I am essentially a matchmaker where I take whistleblowers who have valuable inside information and I pair them, I match them with government agencies, now increasingly even across the world, who basically pay them as
yeah.
confidential informants for that information.
It's more like they're becoming a key witness to a crime being committed.
Yes, so not dissimilar from how the police use informants. We thought that in the United States, the idea was that you need to put a financial safety net under these people because when they speak out, they do so at great personal and professional risk to themselves. So to incentivize them to come forward to compensate for that risk, we're going to pay them a finder's fee, a percentage of any fine that is imposed as a result of their information. So yes, um, it's a very powerful tool, and one that is now even being used in the UK and Canada. So two Commonwealth countries have sort of adopted the model.
Okay, because indeed you work in the US, Canada, UK, and all of a sudden also I saw South Korea on the list. Because
Yes, those are all countries with whistleblower reward programs. So yes,
okay,
I've
yeah,
worked under all of those
okay,
regimes.
that's the
Yes.
common denominator. That program brings it all together. Now,
Yes.
when you talk about okay, I'm a matchmaker. So how often do you see these individuals come to you, or because there's this incentive, what part do you proactively go out and scout for whistleblowers?
I love that question. So I do this is very much the marketing business development side, and it's one of my favorite parts of the job is that we don't just sit and wait for people for the
Yeah,
phone to ring. We are actively out there seeking whistleblowers. And there are ethical constraints on lawyers on ambulance chasing and how you can approach prospective
yeah,
clients. So we obviously are always mindful of those rules. But so I am often sort of trolling the conference circuit, looking for new areas of fraud. So I am, very open about who I am, that I'm a whistleblower lawyer, but it's amazing the number of people who will talk to you when I say, what's going wrong in your industry? So in the United States, we have the Medicare and Medicaid government health insurance programs, and they are, like many programs, frequently subjects to fraud. So I'll often be at healthcare conferences, sort of talking to people on the ground. Asking about where are the vulnerabilities, where are the areas, what are the trends. But I practiced in London when I was seeking to recruit international whistleblowers into the US program. I would hang out at the bar at the London Stock Exchange
really.
because financial frauds.
Yeah.
are a lot of the frauds that the U.S. securities regulator, the SEC, the IRS, there are a number. I mean, fraud is not limited to the U.S. borders, right? Especially the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, money laundering statutes, sanctions violations, right? If you're doing business with Iran and other sanctioned companies, a lot of that is going through big financial centers like London, and so had a lot of success. Actually, some of the most success I had in my career was the 3 years I
Yeah.
spent in London, sort of spreading the word, because a lot of people don't know that you don't have to be American to bring information to the US and be rewarded.
I can imagine when you go to a cocktail party with friends that people will be hanging on your lips of all the great stories you can tell and share. Is that true?
It is in the legal
Yeah.
world. It
Yeah.
is definitely a sexy profession.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is that I have the great fortune to represent sort of the Davids versus
Yeah.
Goliath. And we love a David versus Goliath story. We love a story of the little person like taking on the big bad powerful corporation and winning.
Mhm.
So in my career, I've been very fortunate to represent some very prominent whistleblowers. I know you're in the Netherlands, and we represented one of the Uber files whistleblowers who Uber was had a headquarters in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So Tyler Schultz in America is probably one of the more famous
Yeah.
whistleblowers. And actually around the world for exposing Elizabeth Holmes and the Theranos blood testing scandal. So,
So are you able
um,
to share us a little bit? Okay, how does that happen? So at the end of the day, so you represent Tyler Schultz, Theranos. How did that go about? Come about?
It's a great story in terms of me
Yeah.
affirmatively going out and finding him. So, just like probably most of you, we all were rooting for Elizabeth Holmes. She was on the cover of Forbes. I think a lot of us wanted a first female founder to break through. And so, when John Carreyrou, the Wall Street Journal reporter, wrote sort of the first piece that tried to, pull back the veil of what was really going on, it featured Tyler Schultz as the whistleblower. So I read that story, and what struck me, what I found really tragic, and this happens to a lot of whistleblowers, is that Theranos had actually ambushed him in his grandfather's house because remember, his grandfather was former Secretary of State
George
George
Schultz.
Schultz, who
Yeah.
sat on the board of Theranos, and served him with a restraining order basically saying, you violated your confidentiality agreements by speaking to the Wall Street Journal, and sued him. And Tyler famously said, fraud is not a trade secret, which I agree. He ultimately won, but what the story showed is that his parents, because he was very young at the time, had to mortgage their home to pay close to $200,000 to defend him in the lawsuit saying that he had violated these terms. So they tried to bury him in that way. So I'm reading the article and I'm thinking, wow, he probably doesn't know that he has the opportunity to bring an SEC tip and maybe make back some of this money, that he should be rewarded for cooperating with the SEC. So ethical rules say I can't phone him up directly. So I called his lawyers and said, are you aware there's this SEC program? I think he would qualify if he's interested in talking to a lawyer. I'd be happy to chat with him. And that's how we met. But it was very funny because so Tyler didn't know me from Adam. And he thought, who is this ambulance chasing woman? And so we do joke about that. But that's how we were introduced. So I affirmatively sought him out based on a newspaper article.
Okay. And how often do these whistleblowers regret that they've taken action?
It's a great question. People will often ask them, would you do it again?
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for 30 years. And even though a lot of my clients have had mixed results and have had not had full success, they all say they would do it again, which is remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think that's a question of just that they couldn't abide by being complicit, by
Yeah.
being part of it. And that I think they hopefully learned a lot about themselves and hopefully had support from organizations like our firm and other nonprofits that I work with to make sure that it could be a more positive experience because it certainly can be one of the most difficult journeys if you don't have a network sitting underneath
Yeah.
you. So I don't think all whistleblowers have a positive experience, far from it.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
we've gotten much more aware that whistleblowers don't just need legal support, they need psychosocial support, they need support in how they handle the press. The press is not often equipped to know what they might be unleashing when they thrust a whistleblower into the spotlight. Um, and, we do a lot of work with journalists,
Yeah.
and there's something called the Perugia Principles that tell them and teach them that didn't exist before, that teach them, like, here's some great guidance and best practices for how you handle a whistleblower source. So the world has tried to
Yeah.
rise to the level of being able to protect and support them more because they're so incredibly valuable to us. And I know you work in the world of AI, and I have the great privilege of serving on the chair of a board of a nonprofit that's trying to empower whistleblowers to
But
speak up against, AI, which, as we all know, because there's no regulation, it's not regulated in the US. Luckily, Europe is getting better at that. It's a really
yeah.
vulnerable place to speak up. And of course, there's nothing more powerful in the world right now than a frontier AI lab.
True. And well, it's a completely different topic, but I just want to make that point that what's difficult in this world that you might morally judge something to be wrong. If you look at the AI as an example, what I do see, and I'm also now speaking as the chair of the Institute for Accountability in a Digital Age, that once you take away the guardrails, the whistleblower has nothing to offer anymore because there are no laws being broken. Uh, that also happens.
Totally agree. And so one of the whistleblowers that I represented is a woman by the name of Frances Haugen, and she took on Facebook during the social
Yeah,
media era. And it's completely analogous to what you're talking about with AI. There were no laws regulating social media, but she brought to Congress and sort of created a cultural moment of reckoning where she said it was very much like big tobacco whistleblowers. Meta knew
yeah,
that they were affirmatively harming young girls with targeting body dysmorphic content to get more reactions. And so even though that wasn't illegal and it didn't even lead to legislative change quickly in the US, it did start a movement that we're now finally seeing the fruits of, that created consciousness awareness among the populace about this is wrong. Like,
yeah,
Mark Zuckerberg knew we don't like that. The same way that sort of, Joe Camel advertising and the famous whistleblower who took on big tobacco had a similar effect. And it also prompted her to get to testify in the European Union and the Parliament. Um, and so I do think, even though it may not be illegal, those voices may be what cuts through sort of all of the noise and makes us say, I don't want to be surveilled by AI glasses and I don't want killer robots, right? Even though the law isn't there yet, I don't want that. And somehow these voices who contextualize it, who come from the inside, can reverberate to the larger populace to make them push our legislators to do something.
yeah. Yeah, it's not because you're describing this is not a black and white scenario, and that's also for me uh, a thought I had when you used the David Goliath analogy. Um, how do you do the due diligence on the whistleblower themselves that you're certain, hey, this is a bona fide case I'm working on, and this is not somebody who is out there for revenge? How?
Well, that's a very deep question. It has a bunch of
Yeah,
different layers in there. You can be out for revenge and still be a valid
yeah,
whistleblower, right? So
yeah, true. Yeah,
whistleblowers will often hold multiple motives. And it's funny, in the United States, when we adopted our first whistleblower reward law during the Civil
yeah,
War, the congressional testimony said it takes a rogue to catch a rogue.
yeah,
So sometimes your best source of information are people who are compromised, right? Who are complicit. And they may have are former disgruntled employees. I can't tell you how many clients of mine were sitting in the background thinking it was wrong, but it wasn't until they got fired that that sort of was the animus that drove them to bring. So we don't, we shouldn't care what their motive is. We should care um,
So
whether
yeah, yeah,
they're right. And that's your due diligence point.
yeah,
That's your original point
yeah.
here to me is how do you do the due diligence? We come with a lot of skepticism. Interestingly, we get paid on a contingency fee or success fee basis. So we only get paid if we win as lawyers. So we have a lot of incentive because we're repeat players with these prosecutors that our reputation is most important to us. So we obviously want to win, but we also want them to know that when we bring the SEC or the IRS or HMRC in the UK, when we bring you a tip, they know we've vetted it fully. So we will kick the tires.
Yeah.
We will speak with experts to make sure we will really dig deep to make
Yeah.
sure that but it can be harder when people want to approach you anonymously, right? They want to use the SEC allows whistleblowers to report anonymously. We obviously need to know who they are, but sometimes, they're talking to us through multiple layers. They'll often be a handler, someone who like knows them, who will be the person who interacts with us first, and that becomes even harder. So, yeah,
Yeah, because I was looking on the website and you represented the former chief lobbyist in Europe of Uber.
that's
And
right.
the minute I read, okay, chief lobbyist, and I don't know the case study, but if that person would come to me, I'd be very skeptical because his job is to lobby.
Yes.
And maybe this is a little bit thinking too much in John Grisham books, but it almost looks like a double bluff. Like I'm presenting myself as a whistleblower, but I'm a lobbyist. Um,
Yep. That's
am
a
I making it too dramatic, or is it?
No, I mean those are all that's the skepticism you have to work take this approach. It's healthy skepticism. You have to listen to all those voices because if you're feeling this, then the prosecutor that you're going to bring the case to is going to feel the same
Yeah.
thing. So
No.
you have to have faith in that client. And in the case of Mark
Yeah.
McGann, the Uber client, he had been safely on the other side when he coincidentally heard Frances Haugen speak and felt compelled to actually speak up himself. He was inspired by her to protect a lot of the Uber drivers for this, the economy of independent contractor economy, the gig economy, and he wanted to sort of expose. And he had unprecedented access in that role of lobbyist. He had a lot of access to meetings where potentially questionable conduct
Yeah.
was happening.
You already alluded that a little bit in your previous story, but to what extent is being a whistleblower a lonely job? And B, uh, do whistleblower communities exist, like the whistleblower alumni?
Right. It can be one of the loneliest. And that one of the loneliest places to be is to be a whistleblower inside an organization when you're reporting internally, because often by design, the retaliation that you're meted with is not just to impact you, but it's to send a signal to any other prospective whistleblower in the organization. So, in a way, whistleblowers are treated like they're contagious or radioactive. And so their entire support system at work all of a sudden starts to distance themselves. Like, I don't want to be treated like, Mary, who got sent to Siberia and, basically has, not been promoted and is on her way out the door in the performance improvement plan or is going to be riffed.
Yes.
So it can be, and it creates a concept we've learned sort of as a result of the Me Too movement of gaslighting. You start to doubt yourself because you're like, everyone else seems to think this is okay. Am I the only person? Is there something wrong with me? Have I evaluated this wrong? So there's a lot of self-doubt that happens in that loneliness. And then at the same time, you can imagine coming home if you're the sole breadwinner and you've now jeopardized your career, that creates an enormous amount of friction at home. So the New England Journal of Medicine did studies on pharmaceutical whistleblowers in the US saying higher incidence of alcoholism, divorce, depression because of all of these factors that you mentioned. So but what I want to say on a positive note is again, we've learned we're evolving in the whistleblower community. And with this nonprofit I'm working with called psst.org, we're trying to collectivize the act of whistleblowing because if you can bring whistleblowers together, there's both strength and safety in numbers, but there's also common support. So with scenarios like Theranos or Wirecard scandal, there were people alerting from different parts of the company, but because they'd been siloed, they couldn't find each other or weren't put together. And so we're trying to find ways to match whistleblowers so that they can come with more pieces of the puzzle, but also with that social support network that they're not alone, right? That they've seen something that someone else over in a different geographic region, in the MENA region or the North American region, they all are seeing the same thing. If we can put them together, there's safety and strength in numbers.
I'm not alone. That's basically what you're trying to show them. What
Yes.
what you're also showing me, by the way, in the time we've talked so far, is it seems like you enjoy what you're doing. And so I was wondering what motivates you, what inspires you?
I love what I do. I'm glad that that shows. I'm passionate about whistleblowers, as you said at the start. I do it as my day job and my volunteer job as well. And what inspires me is my clients. These are people who just couldn't sit on their hands and sit quietly by as wrongdoing was afoot. And so I jump out of bed every morning because I want to support them and I'm inspired by the moral compass that these people have, and the strength that it takes to try and take on wrongdoing from the David or the Davids if we're successful in getting collectives. So I'm in that fortunate position of both having individual clients that I get to work with, but also trying to affect the policy and the way the larger society views whistleblowers. So I get to do the policy work, as well as having individual cases and clients. And so it scratches both itches. It's really, um, when I get frustrated in a particular matter, I can think about more of the global trends on how can we support whistleblowers more broadly in society.
Well, hopefully this chapter will help to make more people aware what's happening at the moment. Now, it almost sounds like the way you describe it, like a bumpy road by design, almost that it's not smooth sailing. But over the years you've been doing this, have there been any big failures or mistakes which result in a big learning? Where say, okay, that is a lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I've had one of the most sobering parts of my career is I lost a client. And then I've more recently lost another client, one to suicide and one to just sort of a spiral. Um, and so there can't be a bigger learning moment than the sort of reckoning that you have with what could I have done differently. So I think that has really sort of spurred my passion for making sure that we have adequate psychosocial supports for whistleblowers. I think a lot of people saw that moment, of the loneliness and the burdens of being a whistleblower, the personal tolls when John Barnett, one of the Boeing 737 MAX whistleblowers, took his life. That was fairly recently, and his family did a wrongful death suit, and we got to see his suicide note, which was very sobering and basically said whistleblowers don't have adequate protection. So for me, the wake up call was we need to do more. I was very involved with the client, the first client that I lost, and the story, I was fortunate enough to get the New Yorker magazine to tell the story. So there could be larger learnings, and the article is by an author called Sheila Hotcar. It's called "The Personal Toll of Whistleblowing." So that was really what started my journey of trying to teach fellow lawyers like myself what we can do, not just support our clients with their legal claims, but understanding the supports we need to be putting under them because of the enormous pressures that they're under. I mean, in the case of my particular client, he had lost his job. He'd been blacklisted in the industry. He drained his 401k, and things were, incredibly bleak. And it precipitated, sort of a downward spiral.
Now, the fact that you see, I would say, the reward on being a whistleblower increase, uh, does that mean, what does that say about whistleblowing itself? Do you see, or the fraud being taken place? Is that like stable, increasing, decreasing? Um,
So I feel like fraud is perennial.
yeah,
It's just, I think, part of the human condition.
human nature.
Um, right. And so, that's why I have the great privilege, because there are now so many different reward programs around the world, is I get to look at tax fraud, at healthcare fraud, at defense contractor fraud. So it does make you pretty jaded,
Yeah.
that there tends to be abusive behavior just across industries. It's not one particular industry that is susceptible to it. Um, and so it's a full employment for me.
Yeah.
I always wish that we could wipe out a lot of the frauds that we expose. The cynical part of me that I get from 30 years of this experience is types of healthcare fraud in particular that we thought we had rectified have now cropped up again.
Yeah.
So,
But
you
as
know,
as you mentioned, reality, it's probably human nature. This is human behavior, so it's going to be out there for the for the future. And would you recommend it, if people listen to this, young people out there, hey, I might want to consider this as a career. What would your advice be?
Oh, I think being a whistleblower lawyer is one of the most edifying jobs that you could have, because it allows you to dabble in all of these different areas, right? So one day I'm talking about Iranian sanction violations, and the next day I'm working in the, you know, minute
Yeah.
details of Medicare fraud, right? But the through line is that there are these amazing clients who are coming to me, and are very impassioned to say there's something wrong. And they're usually coming to me from the inside, right? And they're giving a roadmap, very detailed roadmap to the prosecutors that basically supercharges, lights a fire under them to bring cases. So it's incredibly powerful, which makes it and effective. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the most exciting part about the work that I do, is that the reason these programs keep expanding, even across the globe, is that the model works, that insiders, properly protected and incentivized, can bring information to law enforcement that allows them to open up and hold big people accountable. I mean, think it's a dream job.
Okay, well, you've definitely sold it to me. Hey, one last question. Well, I have tons of questions, unfortunately, but we're running out of time. Maybe one last question to end this. Where does the term whistleblower itself come from? What's the origin story of the term whistleblower?
Depends on where you sit in the world. So in the United States, the term whistleblower came from people working on the production line. And if you saw something that was amiss on the production line, you'd blow the whistle and it would stop the production line. In the United Kingdom, the term whistleblower originated from police service. So a police officer would blow the whistle to bring other
Mhm.
um, reinforcements to come and observe and help. So it really depends on where you sit in the globe, that what the origin of the word whistleblower comes from.
And
And I should say,
yeah, sure.
it's always so incredible to me to see whistles continuing. There's obviously different types of whistleblowers that you see in what's going on in Minneapolis, and with the ICE agents coming and abusing their remit and, taking in people who are not violent offenders or anything, but actually just normal, everyday citizens, lots of people there who are here legally or not, that how their community members have protected them is by blowing the whistle when the ICE officers start to come. So that whistle is still being used in lots of different settings, but it's really reassuring if you've ever watched any of the footage of communities throughout these cities that are being besieged. They're blowing the whistles everywhere to tell people ICE is coming so they can protect themselves.
Mary, I want to thank you so much for being on the brand called You. We've run out of time, but you have taken you scratched the surface of what it means to be in a whistleblower community and what that world looks like. So I want to thank you very much for sharing your story of the brand called You.
I want to thank you so much for having me and for your terrific questions. It's been a real delight.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.